Hey everyone, Travis here in the Dragonsteel Books bookstore pop-up with Brandon Sanderson. And there's some chaos going on behind us because what you can't see maybe from this angle, or maybe just a glimpse, is that we're at day 0 of the convention. So forklifts and craziness going on. But you know, what's it like for you here on day 0, seeing everything set up?
Man, it gets bigger and bigger and more impressive. Nexus, our convention, started because of my book launches, and the team just has kind of taken that and run with it, and they run faster and faster.
And congratulations on the new name, because I know you guys were flirting with different names over the last couple of years and landed on Nexus.
We landed on Nexus. There's a big pop culture convention that has Nexus in its name. DSNX was a nice acronym for us to be able to write. We just wanted something that sounded right. We took our time.
Well, what are you celebrating the launch of this year at this Nexus?
So this is book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, Wind and Truth. And I am super happy to have this book out.
Did it take a lot out of you? Because I feel like every Stormlight book has taken more from you. I remember Rhythm of War, you're like, okay, this is a little bit more than usual, and this one,
This was slightly less emotional anguish than Rhythm of War. Rhythm of War had the issue with the flashbacks, me getting to it and realizing that what I had planned wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And this one, the flashbacks do work. Yeah. And so that saved me some, but it is the biggest of the Stormlight Archive, and all the Stormlight Archive books, like the amount of brain space they take, the amount of emotional effort, the amount of just sheer work, they leave me quite exhausted.
Well, and we should say first off that for those that are watching, we're not going to put any spoilers in here, or if we do, we'll put a big spoiler warning, but I think it is safe to say that this is the end of the first arc,
Yes, I plotted Stormlight Archive as 2 arcs.
Yeah.
And so it's not the end of the story. It is definitely a more midpoint than it is ending, but it is more ending than beginning. It is a distinct. Things change after this book.
What is your, because I know you do beta reads, you have a lot of people that get eyes on it beforehand. What do you anticipate being the reaction? Because I think these days, so many people come into endings, and even if this is not the ending of the series, it's the ending of Act 1, or Part 1, and they have their own ideas of stuff, so...
I think if I said too much, it would be spoilers.
Okay.
It really would be.
Yes.
I know what people are most likely to say.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see how things go over the next week or two. How do you react to book launches? Are you? I know you're active on Reddit oftentimes. Like, how much are you looking at the reactions in real time versus having these things kind of brought to you?
So I don't watch the book launch reactions in real time as much as you might think, because I've already done all the betas and alpha reads. Very rarely am I surprised by it. I generally, the audience getting the book responds as the last rounds of beta reads have. Does that make sense? Maybe not the early alpha reads, because I'm changing so much, but generally as the gammas are coming in, we're getting our last rounds of feedback, and I know what people are generally going to say. That said, I do watch, I'm active on Reddit, I do watch the subreddit. Once in a while things do surprise me, and that's good. But yeah, I will be watching, but probably not as closely as you think I would be for how big a book this is.
All right, so Stormlight is kind of going on hiatus after this one for a little bit while you work on other projects, correct?
Yeah.
So I know there are a lot of people who may be like, I like these other series, but Stormlight is really where it's at for me. You tend to pop in with novellas and short stories and stuff. Is there any chance that there will be little Stormlight snippets at all?
I've already planned in the Horneater novella, which is about a specific individual in the Stormlight Archive that people want to know what happens with them. So that'll be in there. Hiatus is not how I actually would phrase it. I'm normally, a Stormlight Archive book is every 3 years, or this one's 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm basically taking a double long break between, right? It'll be 6 to 8 years instead of 3 to 4 years. I don't consider it a hiatus. I just have other things in the Cosmere I need to catch up on. And beyond that, the way that I stay creative is by always doing something new. And I can tell that I've done too much Stormlight.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of what happens in authors' careers, particularly as they progress in their careers. A lot of authors, the book starts slowing down. And I really do think, for my own personal psychology, the way to combat that is to make sure I've always got something new that I'm excited by. I don't think I should be working on the Stormlight Archive when I'm not excited by it. And I think giving myself some time to work on something else is going to help with that.
Yeah. Speaking of new things, the Cosmere RPG,
Yeah.
which started as the Stormlight RPG and now has
Yeah.
been announced to have expanded. I know that in particular is a big project for your creative collaborator, Dan, but for you, I'm sure it was a chance to really kind of start to flesh out the world. For instance, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that we see more of some Knights Radiant orders than others in the
Yes.
first first 4 at least books that I've read, and yet I think people will want to play as all these different orders.
Yep.
So I'm sure you had to kind of balance, like, how much do I want to save around how these orders work versus
Right.
how much do I want people to be able to embrace that fantasy? How did you approach that?
You know, it's kind of time to start letting the whole thing be known. And what I've found in writing the Stormlight Archive is that I can do so much with an individual's intersection with the orders that I don't need to maintain quite as much of the mystique as I thought I needed to.
Yeah.
Because each person's journey is so individual. Being able to write how Lopen interfaces with the Oaths versus how Kaladin or Tef did, those all worked really well. And those are 3 people in the same order, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
I told the RPG team, you can go ahead and you can include these things, and it'll totally be fine.
Well, talking about expanding the world and kind of bringing other things in, I think the last time we did an interview was after Wax and Wayne 4. Since then, there have been secret projects that have come out. You've been working on this. At the
Yeah.
time, I asked you how you were managing the balance of bringing in other elements of the Cosmere and other stories into the novels that you're writing, while also making sure that people don't have like that crazy burden of knowledge that they need for
Yeah.
everything. I wanted to check in a couple years
Yeah.
later as you've written more and sort of see how you're feeling about all that.
Yeah, I feel like I feel good. There is this odd thing that happens where people are reading the books now, and I want to make sure that you can always just only read Stormlight Archive if you want to. And there are more and more crossovers and influences. The weird thing is those were all there in Elantris. I just hadn't written all the other books yet,
Yeah.
right? They're all there in Mistborn. You just don't know. And so the things that are crossovers into Mistborn are crossovers from Dragonsteel, which hasn't been written yet.
Right.
And so I want to make it clear to people, like, yes, there are crossovers. I kind of took the gloves off a little bit. I don't have to dance around these things anymore. But that doesn't mean that the series should require reading outside the series.
Yeah.
Now, there might be characters from outside the series in here, but again, Elantris was full of them. Mistborn was full of them. You just don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can read Stormlight, and you don't have to read any of the other stuff. That's not my intent. Like, I could have written Stormlight first with all of these characters in it,
Yeah.
and you would have had none of those books to be able to read. And I think it would work just as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I always talk about my world building. I use this idea called fractal world building. Have I used that with you before?
No, I don't think so. I've heard you mention it
Yeah.
elsewhere, but
This idea of a fractal, one of the attributes of a fractal is the closer you look, the more detailed it gets, right? Some of them have repeating patterns or whatnot. A coastline is usually described as having fractal-like qualities. The closer you zoom in, the more detailed it gets. I want my books to be that.
Yeah.
You can get the whole picture. You look at a map, you get the picture of the map. You know, not just the fantasy map, but like a map in the real world. You zoom in, you can get as much detail as you want. But as a reader, I want you to be able to just read and be like, this is the shape of the world building. I get it. As someone who really likes detailed world building, I want you to be able to zoom in and find a lot more to love. So that I feel like that balance is there. For me, I have to watch how the fans are feeling, and I know that they feel like it might be getting a little far for much for them, and so I am watching it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. You and I have talked about video games before, and I know there are so many designers that want to create those games that are like easy to pick up and play, but difficult to master. It feels like that kind of same thing where you want people to be able to pick up a book and read it.
It's exactly the same thing.
But there's so much more,
Yeah, we were talking about Bellatra earlier, which is the same sort of way. You pick it up, you get it. You can explain Bellatra to someone in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But then figuring out how it all works takes you some hours of gameplay.
Yeah. One of the things that I have picked up with and was talking to a friend about is that, and I'll keep this vague for spoiler reasons, but we have hit a point in time in the Cosmere with a lot of the books where we are sort of starting to advance the magic systems and the technologies and all that. I've noticed that there's a trend in a lot of the novels of scholar characters kind of going in and researching stuff. In a lot of cases, it'll be like the main character who's like, I got to go in the lab and figure this stuff out. Is there a concern at all that could end up becoming a little bit of like a trope? Because you're kind of, I'm sure it's difficult. You have to advance the magic systems. You have to let the stuff be a discovery that happens naturally, but also, you can't have every character coming into the lab.
I tend to like to write these characters.
Because you're one of those characters.
Because I am one of those characters. And I've often said what inspired me as a fantasy novelist was reading some of the ways that people through the late Renaissance and early Industrial Revolution interfaced with science. When science, the world around them was something mystical that became something concrete as they figured out the rules and were able to replicate them. And that is, I love that. That's like, if I want one sort of theme or feel to my books, the world building, it's that. The mystical becoming repeatable. That idea of science can solve problems is really powerful and important to me. But I do have to be careful because we have a large number of scientist characters for sure.
Well, often I found you'll have main characters where it's like, okay, this person's kind of the roguish outlaw mercenary type, or and then you'll be like, okay, now we're in the lab and we're conducting all this stuff, and so I'm sure it must be difficult to try to figure out how to advance the technology systems and have your main characters be part of that while also not ending up having it be too
that's a very astute question. It is something I've been aware of.
I'm excited to see how things go.
We don't want to turn Kaladin or Dalinar into a scientist.
Exactly. And I was trying to reflect on how some of it had worked earlier in the Cosmere, and very early on in Mistborn, you have Vin learning that. There was already some inherent knowledge, I think, just from the way the world worked, but she gets that from a mentor, right?
Right. But of course, Raoden's a scientist, basically.
That's true.
That's the whole story of Elantris is,
All right, well, the other question I had, as we start to kind of go more into like a meta discussion of the business and the world around you, I remember you mentioning in a previous piece of content, and also you kind of just referenced it now, how early on in your writing, you were attaching all these little hooks for other things that you wanted to write. I remember you mentioned like you could not pitch the idea of some grand connected universe because people were not thrilled about that.
Nope.
Then MCU came along, really opened it up. I wonder now, do you feel like there's starting to become a little bit of a backlash to these things?
Yes. Good question. I think it's because people put the cart before the horse. The backlash, in my opinion, maybe the audience will have a different opinion because they definitely get to be the one that decides how trends go. My experience is there's only one group has done it right. And that has been the MCU. How do you do it right? You make sure that the story you're telling is fantastic, and then you build organically, even if you have a plan, from that. And they're having the same trouble I had with actually Way of Kings Prime. If you're not familiar with this, it's the book I wrote in 2002 that failed because I'd been reading Wheel of Time, I've been reading Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm like, I love all the complexity of all these characters. I want to write a book like that. And I did, and it fell on its face because I was reading the end of The Wheel of Time, and like book 4 or whatever, book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire. And these were books that had taken time to build a foundation of characters that then split off, and started having their own storylines, and it gave the story time to grow.
Yeah.
And when I rebuilt The Way of Kings and wrote it again in 2010, I was using more of this sort of philosophy. Let's take the story I want to tell right now about this character, and let's grow that organically and let it build into something that is a giant epic, rather than saying, giant epic, page 1. And I think they're trying to build, they look at the Avengers and say, I want that, start with that.
Yeah.
And every one of those has failed.
Do you worry, because I know you've talked about this before, and many people have discussed how cyclical Hollywood and media are, right? Where it's like, okay, fantasy, nobody wants fantasy. Oh, Lord of the Rings hit. Okay, now everything's going to be fantasy. Oh, nobody wants young adult stuff. Okay, Harry Potter. Is there any concern that with the connected universe stuff, especially with a little bit of a backlash, that we're missing that little window? You're going to have to wait for the next cycle to spin back up.
I'm not so worried about that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. First off, nobody did it well except the MCU in film. I can't think of someone else that didn't get too excited and too eager and stumble. Even the Lego movie, which started great, and I think the Lego movie too is excellent, and Lego Batman, they still managed to stumble by being like, we're building everything, rather than telling the stories, because the stories were good stories to tell. I'm not worried, because if it works in films, the pitch for this Cosmere is not, it's a giant interconnected universe. It's not how I ever pitch it. It's not how it should be pitched.
Yeah.
It should be pitched as, this is Mistborn. This is why Mistborn is great. I want, if you want a good book, go read Mistborn. There's more if you love it. Each of them have their own sort of style and theme and things like that. But at the same time, I wrote Mistborn specifically so that the first book, if you only wanted to read one fantasy novel, you could end at the first book and feel happy.
Yeah.
And I still feel that. If somebody reads Mistborn, the first book, and says, wow, that was really good, but I don't feel like any more of this right now, and walks away, I've still been successful.
Right.
I've given them, because the one of the pitches for Mistborn was an entire epic fantasy in one novel.
Right.
Yes, there's 2 sequels. I hope that people will eventually get to those, but at the same time, they've read one of my books and they liked it. I've been successful, right?
Yeah.
I don't need people to dive into the Cosmere. All I want to do is write great stories that people enjoy.
Yeah, that's well said. You also, in addition to writing great stories, enjoy surprising people.
I do.
Always Another Secret. Recently, Secret Project 5, I believe. Is that the nomenclature you're using for it?
Yes, we're using Secret Project 5.
Secret Project 5 was announced. My concern, so when I heard that, I was like, okay, you're going to get to a point where the surprise will be, guess what, guys, I didn't write anything in secret.
I know.
So how do you balance that, right? Because you want to both surprise and delight people, but at a certain point in time, everyone's just going to expect it's coming.
This is something that, as a writer, you have to not worry about too much.
Yeah.
A couple of reasons. Number one, you will drive yourself crazy, right? And every author deals with this, with the twists in their books.
Yeah.
And I have watched certain books that will remain unnamed. The authors get into an arms race with their readers, and as soon as their readers figure something out, they change, and then their readers and then they change.
Yeah.
And what you end up with is sometimes that pushes the author to get better, if you do it right. Sometimes you end up just with unsatisfying twists because the author is throwing away a lot of their foreshadowing. And things like that. You can't get in an arms race. I actually made a video about this. The kind of end of the big Secret Project Kickstarter was a video about me saying, wow, how will I ever surprise people ever again? And me kind of just deciding, it doesn't matter, right? I did this thing, I'll do other things. And, I'm not worried about over-delivering.
That's
right?
a good philosophy. Yeah.
And if people, it's like, oh, Brandon wrote more books. As long as they're still interested in reading them, it's okay.
Yeah.
I never have to do something that hits the kind of collective unconsciousness of the country the way that the Secret Project did. I never have to do something where, and maybe I will, maybe it'll be great, but where all the mainstream media is like, whoa.
Yeah.
I did that. That worked. It was great.
Another thing that you've been working on, we talked about this at the beginning, but bringing it back to this, is this event, Dragonsteel Nexus.
Yeah.
This is my third Dragonsteel Nexus or Dragonsteel event. Missed the first one, but the growth has been phenomenal. I know you had to deal with a bunch of disappointed people whenever things sold out so quickly. I think faster than anyone expected.
It's something we need to work on. We're trying.
Yeah.
But yeah. We need like a random ticketing system where it's like you've been, so you don't have to sit there and be waiting to hit a button. It's like you have 24 hours. So we're figuring it out.
And everybody struggles with this. Like,
everybody does.
Magic has just got in trouble for some secret lair stuff, and Worlds tickets and leagues sell out faster than everybody wants. But I think for me, one of the things that struck me was how quickly this convention has grown, and I'm really wondering, what do you attribute that growth to?
Yeah.
How much of it is like the convention? How much of it is the growth in Cosmere and your popularity?
I think that, I've thought a lot about this. I think that people want in-person experiences. And I think during the years of the pandemic, we realized how much we missed these things. And I personally attribute the growth of Nexus to being like us trying to make it not just the convention where you buy stuff, right? And I worry that too many conventions, too many Comic-Cons, like there's that natural push and pull between the artistry and but everywhere you turn, it's only things to buy, and it's hard to run a convention that's not like that, right? We want to give booths to cool authors to come and talk to people. They're going to want you to look at and look into their books, but finding experiences that we can do at the convention in person that are a highlight of someone's year, that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah. What do you attribute the success or the big growth points of your business as coming from? And I ask that because over the years, I have seen all these fun little moments. I remember during the pandemic when it was Adam holding his phone up as you are in between shelves signing stuff and starting to talk, and then that eventually grew into a very successful YouTube channel. You've had the convention pop off. What are the things for you, because you have a very entrepreneurial spirit.
I do.
What are the moments where you're like, oh, that really made a bunch of stuff pop off? Secret projects.
I can point to a couple of these. One of them is me spending years trying to persuade New York, meaning New York Publishing, that it's the 21st century. Maybe we should abandon the stuff, the 19th stuff they've got left over from the 1900s, and the stuff they've got left over from the 19th century, the 1800s. Sure. Like, the publishing industry just does not want to change. And so me going to them and saying, hey, we should be doing some of these things. We should have a more variety of price points. We should have swag bundles. We should be doing some direct-to-consumer stuff and things like this. People really want leather bounds. We should be doing some really nice leather bounds, and being told no. And the decision point, the big point was, I'm like, well, they're just not going to listen. I'll just have to do it.
Yeah.
The realization of I'll just do it was a big one. Another big one was when Amazon turned off the ability to buy my books during their contract disputes with Macmillan over this whole stuff that turned into the price fixing fiasco and things like that. Part of that war was them turning off the ability to buy the Buy It Now button for the books, all Macmillan books, and realizing I want to be outside of Amazon's ability to do that. So how can I create a business that doesn't depend on Amazon? Part of it is my natural showman spirit, right? The ringmaster standing in the ring, thinking about what can I do that's just gonna be really fun, that people will be excited by. And Like the Secret Project grew out of me wanting just to write stories for my wife and to explore going different directions with my storytelling, and then realizing I got these 4 books, I should do something that is spectacular with them. What can I do? And I have not yet run out of ideas for what can I do, not just the story writing, but the what can I do. And I would say the decision points are these moments, and then my team catching the vision. Because I couldn't do it without the team, right? The reason that most authors don't do this is not because they couldn't, they don't have the dreams, the ideas. They absolutely do. It's just building a team and having all this stuff is more of an annoyance to them than I think it is to me, if that makes sense. There's lots of very smart authors with really cool ideas. They just don't want to have an HR department.
Yeah. Of all the events that you have done, or all the moments that you have created, where are the moments where you see the greatest jumps, right? Because no growth is linear. So, I'm sure that gets reflected in, oh, wow, we sold way more books randomly last month, or our social media went crazy. I assume Secret Project's one of those, but where are those moments
I can give you a few of those. So the first one that I can tell you is when Mistborn underperformed. I know I won't tell this story too much because I've told it a lot, but Mistborn had a cover on paperback that didn't connect with people. I violated kind of a cardinal rule of publishing. I didn't publish a sequel to my first book. And when you're new, you get a certain amount of attention as a debut. And so when you're not doing a follow-up to that, holding that audience, but I wanted to establish very early on that I did lots of different things. So Elantris followed by Mistborn. Mistborn underperformed. Elantris sold like 10,000 copies. Mistborn sold like 8,000. This isn't hardcover. That's good numbers for hardcover. Even back then, it was good numbers, back when we sold more hardcovers.
But it's a downward trend.
But it's a downward trend, and so they printed 6,000 of Mistborn 2. Right? And then Mistborn 2 sold out because I had, wisely, and this is partially my agent, I wasn't as smart back then about the publishing industry. He's like, we need to get them to repackage this. And I convinced them to do a $5 edition. Which I had seen Robert Jordan do. And I'm like, do one of these for Mistborn. And they did, and the paperback took off, and then the hardcover overperformed and went and ended up selling about 12,000 copies. I had emergency reprint and things like that. And then I was back on the upward trend. Obviously, another one is The Wheel of Time. And I would say it's after my first Wheel of Time book came out. The announcement did some for me, and that's why I released Warbreaker as a Creative Commons book, so that those who wanted to try me out, hearing the announcement, could have a low barrier to entry, at lowest barrier entry to entry possible. But it was really after people started reading them. And this is an odd thing, because normally this doesn't happen. If you go talk to people and say, what did writing that Halo book do for you? They'll be like, well, I cashed the check. I had fun writing it. I like Halo, but you don't get crossover audience. And everyone I've talked to that's ever done something like this has never gotten a crossover audience, and I did. I did on the Wheel of Time. And whether that's, because, I'll leave everyone to speculate on why that happened. I think releasing Stormlight when I did was a very smart move. I still attribute one of the smartest things I've ever done was drop. I was working on a book called The Liar of Partenell, which was, and I said, I got to do Stormlight. I got to do it now. And get the publisher on board when they were happy with me, because the first Wheel of Time book had sold so well. They were happy, so I was able to get them to do things like put in the colored end pages and stuff that they wouldn't have done for me otherwise. And so this book came out and looked way nicer than it should have, because the publisher was kind of tricked into overspending on it. And then it obviously paid off for them. But big, thick books with lots of art are a huge chance for a flop in the publishing industry. Having a book that costs double to print from another book that you could be selling, because you can't sell that book for double. You look on the shelves and, mine costs I don't know what the prices are now, but it's like, $13 and the other book is $11, but mine is twice as big and has all this art. I got away with murder on that one, and it paid off, but the other big one has been the most recent trend has been TikTok.
Okay.
And TikTok really likes Mistborn, and TikTok really likes Tress of the Emerald Sea. So for most of the last 15 years, Stormlight has been trending higher than Mistborn.
Yeah.
Until Mistborn took off on TikTok. And this year, Mistborn has overtaken Stormlight for the first time in many years in sales momentum.
Yeah.
And then Tress of the Emerald Sea. Tress sells like Mistborn or Stormlight do. And it's the most everything you do, you expect to kind of sell a little beneath your flagships, right?
Yeah.
That's just how entertainment works. But Tress has become a flagship, which that surprised me. But I think it just matches for the... Once in a while, you can be ahead of the trend.
Yeah.
And I wrote Tress not knowing that the trend would turn into cozies and romanticies. And Tress kind of really fits in that sort of cozy, standalone romantasy sort of vein. Without me knowing that I had done that. Well, we didn't know that was going to be the trend, and I just happened to be writing something that fit the trend, and that it came out right at the right time.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking through all the books you've written. I see Warbreaker on the shelf right behind you, and I was wondering, have you considered going on a second honeymoon anytime soon?
Let me finish the Elantra sequels first. I do want to do Warbreaker sequel, but I've got this hit list of things I started before the Wheel of Time that I promised people sequels to. You'll notice after the Wheel of Time, I no longer promise sequels.
Right.
Before I did, so we've got there was Legion and the Rhythmatist and Alcatraz and Warbreaker and Elantris. All were things that I promised sequels to, along with Stormlight Mistborn, but those are the flagships, right?
Yeah.
And I managed to get Legion, Alcatraz, crossed off that list, but I still have Rhythmatist, Elantris, and Warbreaker sequels. And Elantris sequels fit best into the framework of the structure of the story I'm telling right now.
So I want to spend the last bit of this interview here just kind of speed running through a bunch of non-Cosmere stuff, but perhaps relevant to your interests and your endeavors.
Yeah.
About, I think, 4 or 5 months ago, myself and my friend Mark Zimmerman, who was in that original interview that I did with you a long time ago, he's the commissioner of the LCS, we tricked Dan and your staff into getting you to support a League of Legends esports team. That team has now won, and you're going to continue that partnership, I think, into this next split. I know you are not a League of Legends player by any means.
Yep.
But you have a winning sports team.
I do.
That must be kind of cool.
That is really cool. I was talked into this by just the idea of helping people live their dreams.
Yes.
Like, this is a student league. I also fund the student magazines at the student science fiction magazines. Like, I dedicate my salary every year, and we put it into that fund. There's a fund other people have put into that. It's not just me.
Sure.
But I'm one of the major donors. Letting college students aspire to work in fields that people have told them all their lives are not jobs, and giving them that chance to see what it would be like. Once they graduate from that, they got to go find it on their own. But I can help with that, and that was the way it was pitched to me. And that's something I'm fully on board with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is really cool, and they did win, so I feel like you did really help facilitate that, and I think a bunch of League fans are very happy to see your inclusion there. Similarly, you have not watched Arcane Season 2.
I haven't gotten to it yet. So I watch these things with my wife, and she has to be in the right mood for something that's emotionally draining.
Yeah.
And so I tried to talk her into it, and she was like, it's going to be depressing. I'm like, well, it's grimdark. It's going to be depressing.
Yeah.
And we watched Die Hard instead because, it's the holidays. So, I'll try again.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that if you can't win there, then maybe you'll be able to.
I'll watch it on my own.
Yeah.
If I want to watch it with her, but if she doesn't end up wanting to watch it, I will watch it on my own. The first season was so good, and it's like if you're going to look at right now, what is the top fantasy creation of this year?
Yeah.
It's probably Arcane Season 2.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much that's in contention. At least in film and television. I hope I'm in contention, concord.
We include books, yeah.
If you include books, but, you got to be aware of what the best people are doing.
Yeah.
And Arcane Season 1 being as fantastic as it was, I would be surprised if Arcane Season 2 isn't the best fantasy creation of the year.
It is really good. I'm hoping we get a conversation with Dan about it as when you do get to watch it.
We do tend to get to things about a year late, so expect next August us to start talking
Very
about
timely.
Season 2. Yeah.
All right, you also share with me a passion for Magic the Gathering. We're both really into it. How have you gotten any new cards for your cube recently?
Yeah, so I'm starting to feel like current Magic is making cubes too fast. And this means that the games are starting to be a little bit too much like vintage, actual vintage, meaning once in a while you get a really good back and forth vintage, but vintage is often like Gentleman's Duel, Guns at Dawn, right? It's who has a force. Do you have a force of will? If not, I'm going off and I'm winning. Or do you have turn one shops into disruption? Can you stop this? If you can't, I'm going to win. And I worry that right now, Power Cube is turning into, can you stop a turn one Ragavan? And that's not even the strongest play I can make. Right? Like turn one Ragavan is now down like 5 or 6 steps. It's like, can you deal with a turn one White Plume Adventurer? If not, well, let's go to game 2. And too often it's like turn 3, you're going to game 2. And that's worrying me. And so I might have to come up with people are doing retro cubes. That's one of the things I've been working on for years. I might have to soup that up. I don't know. I'm worried about that. There are some cool things. Like I like the new mystery boosters have a couple of cool cards for cube that I like. The thing we're missing most is we need another set of fetch lands. I run 2. I run duplicates of all the fetches because we need So
what do you think? I mentioned this to you at the start. You said you were clued in on the news that next year they're going to be half of the sets will be Universes Beyond, so other IP, and that all of these sets all Universes Beyond sets will now in Standard. I know you don't play much Standard, but
but I follow it.
As a long-time Magic player,
as a long-time Magic, I mean. So let's say this. Wizards has not been horrendously wrong yet, and we've thought that they would be. So we thought that the Universes Beyond in the first place, a lot of us thought it was kind of like, I've always been on board for a Tolkien set, but when they released Walking Dead and the Stranger Things ones, I'm like, But then that Tolkien set came out, and the number of people I know that would always have loved Magic but never got into it, who got into it because of that Tolkien set, changed my view. The way that people loved buying the Doctor Who Commander decks and being able to play Doctor Who Commander against each other changed my mind, right? I'm like, oh, those are perfect. The Warhammer ones, the Doctor Who ones, where you can buy a Commander deck and just go, as a Doctor Who fan, play it. It's actually a really cool idea, and it has been really nice being kind of in the more kitchen table world, seeing how much people love these things. And when they announced this, I'm building up to, when they announced this other announcement, I'm like, this is the one that they're wrong on. But so far, they haven't been, right? I am worried as a longtime Magic lover about how uninterested I'm becoming in new sets, because they're so frequent. I'm just starting to show up to drafts and be like, well, whatever the new set is, we'll draft it and I'll discover it then. Not caring about spoilers, because there's always spoilers. The sets are great. I don't know if you've done this, but I went back and drafted Rise of the Eldrazi.
Oh no, I'm not.
Rise of the Eldrazi is bad now.
Oh really?
It used to be one of the top draft formats ever, right?
Yeah.
We drafted it recently. It does not hold up because modern draft aesthetics are so much better.
Yeah.
The drafts play better. We talk about good back and forth, lots of cool decisions during drafting and during playing. Draft is the best it's ever been. Duskmourn draft environment was fantastic, and it just blows away Innistrad. And this is a hot take.
Yeah.
But if you go back, I have cubes of these things. If you go back and play them, they're fun for nostalgia reasons, but Innistrad plays a lot like March of the Machines did. It's just so fast that if you don't have a turn 2 play, you just die.
Yeah.
Whereas even though Magic feels faster now, they make it more interactive at that earlier speeds. And so drafting is so good now. So I'm not mad at the design teams. They're knocking it out of the park. Every game I play is fun. I'm just worried I notice in myself a lack of enthusiasm in ways I used to be enthusiastic.
Yeah. Any worry about the IPs coming in? Because that's a big thing.
Right? I mean, I'm not as worried as the internet is.
Yeah.
Right? I think number one, the cat is out of the bag, right? Or the Pandora's box has been opened.
Sure.
You're already having these things, so let's let people love what they love. And this is what Magic is now. The design is still really good, and you can still express yourself by building decks however you want. And let's not pretend that old Magic wasn't silly. I do think something has now been lost.
Yeah.
We can't ever get it back. I do like what's being made now. We can't go back to where it was, so I have let go of it. I don't think that influences my enthusiasm so much as the amount of product.
Yeah.
I think the amount is overwhelming.
Last question. I know you play a lot of Elden Ring, and
Yes.
I've seen the Elden Ring content.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously news right now about a chance that Kadokawa, which owns the Elden Ring studio, is perhaps going to get purchased by Sony. There's been a lot of concern. As somebody who cares a lot about that IP, who thinks a lot about media and companies and all this stuff, what do you think of the news?
So this isn't the worst people who could buy it, right? Sony has done acquisitions in the past where they have kept to their word and allowed things that were cross-platform to remain cross-platform. And they have also in the past messed some things up. Their track record is not as bad as some other companies.
Yeah.
I would rather FromSoft remain independent. I mean, seems pretty obvious to me, but I always, when these things happen, think back to why Tom Doherty sold Tor. So back in the early 90s, Tom Doherty decided to sell Tor books to Macmillan, and he remained as CEO. And I look back at that, and at the time, people were like, this is a disaster. It gave him the money he needed to launch the Wheel of Time. He says he would not have been able to launch the Wheel of Time without the push of a big publisher behind Tor, which was at the time an independent press. And there are reasons to do that. So would I choose this to happen? No. Don't fix, what isn't broken. But it's not the death knell that I think people are worried it will be. Sony doesn't always ruin the things that they buy. Yeah. There are some others that seem to always ruin whatever they buy. And Sony, and they also don't always buy something and then make it exclusive. In fact, the trend right now in gaming is to move away from exclusivity. Yeah. And fewer things are being exclusive, and more things are at least going to PC. And so I think that's a good trend, and I hope to see that trend continuing. Because what we find is we still don't have a Bloodborne remaster. Come on, give us a Bloodborne remaster. But so my thoughts are complicated. Like a lot of people's thoughts are complicated. I would want to see what happens, and I would try to take the optimistic look at it.
Very good. Well, I know you have a weekly update to film, so we will get to that. But is there anything that you would like to say to all the people that are going to be picking up Stormlight 5 in the next couple days?
Be very careful about spoilers.